Hello, my name is Derek Deputy. This is the Derek Deputy Video Game Show. Today we'll be talking about that recent Phil Spencer interview, the potential for an upcoming Superman game, and I recently took a trip to Indiana Comic Con, which isn't super video game related, but I figure it might be interesting to mention here. We are officially available on most podcasting platforms. Make sure if you're listening on YouTube to comment, like, and subscribe. If you're not listening on YouTube, or you're listening on some other podcast platform, make sure to follow or like or whatever, subscribe, whatever it's the podcast platform has you do for future episodes. Once again, my name's Derek Deputy. I'm dealing with a bit of a cold and a bit of a stomach flu at the moment. So we're going to make our way through that, work our way through that. I didn't get an episode up last week because I was working on the podcast platform thing. But here we are. Let's get straight into things. So Microsoft has had it a pretty rough the last few years. Really, through most of the Xbox One generation. And they did get the Bethesda acquisition a few years back. That's helped them, but recently, this year in particular, has not been so great. They did release Hi-Fi Rush, which was reviewed generally well, but they also released Redfall here recently, which did not review super well, and they also had their acquisition of Activision Blizzard blocked in the UK, which is a really, really bad thing. So recently, Phil Spencer went over to Kinda Funny, and he had an interview. I am even though the interview was with Kinda Funny, I am reading most of this off of GameIndustry.biz. Their managing editor, Brendan Sinclair, put out a good article about this. And the important thing, the part I find most interesting, is at one point he said, "We're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution or win for us. I know that will upset a ton of people, but the truth of the matter is, when you're third place in the console marketplace, and the top two players are as strong as they are, and have in certain cases a very discreet focus on doing deals and other things that kind of make being Xbox hard for us as a team, that's on us, not on anybody else. I see it out there. I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true if we go off and build great games. All of a sudden, you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One generation, where everybody built their digital library of games. This idea, if we just focus more on great games on our console, that somehow we're going to win the console race, I think doesn't relate to the reality of most people. And I am bringing this quote up specifically because I think he's 100% right. Later, he mentioned something about how Starfield could be an 11 out of 10, and it won't make people go out and sell their PS5s. And that's true. Money is limited. And people, not everyone's going to own all three consoles, but at the same time, Microsoft obviously is less worried about console sales and more worried about selling Game Pass. They know they're not going to outsell Sony and Nintendo when it comes to consoles, but if they put Game Pass out there, they can make a lot of money, and they can reach more gamers by putting that on things outside of Xbox. Game Pass is available on PC. I believe it's either available or going to be available on mobile. It reaches a much wider audience. And I also think this is kind of him saying, hey, we don't see there is being a console war anymore. Back in the days of the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, obviously there was a huge console war, and even into like the GameCube, Xbox, PS2 era, it was something fans really focused on. But at this point, I think all three companies. I think maybe Sony still kind of sees it as there being a console war, but I think for the most part, most companies don't really see that way. They feel that just because someone else is successful doesn't mean uh, they can't also be successful. People can potentially own all three consoles. I know not everyone's going to do that, kind of expensive, but it is something some people can do. And they're less worried about trying to compete with Sony and Nintendo and just trying to put out great games and make money off those great games and make money off of Game Pass. They're more concerned about what money they can make versus how much money they can make compared to their competition, and they don't really even see them as competition. Uh, it's a pretty interesting interview. The entire interview can be found at Kind of Funny's YouTube channel, and I would suggest going to check it out because it is a very good interview. So moving on to our next topic. Recently, I went back and I played Marvel's Avengers for the first time. I did not play it at release, but I did play it here recently, specifically the PlayStation 5 version. When that game released, it did not do super well on the review-wise. Actually, let me pull it up on Metacritic here real quick. It has the PS5 version specifically has a 73 on Metacritic at the moment with a 5.7 user score as of this recording. But I decided to play it because I am a big fan of Marvel and their properties. I did play this, full disclosure here, recently in May of 2023 after the service end date. So a lot of the problems that a lot of other people had with the game, within the live service aspects, I didn't personally have to deal with. I had everything unlocked from the beginning and basically just played through the story plus a few additional missions so I could fully try every character. Most characters do feel pretty similar, fitting one of several archetypes. So you have the ones that jump and the ones that can fly, and you have ones that can swing and so on. Maybe with a grappling hook or a spider web in the case of Spider-Man, or stretching their arm out in the case of Miss Marvel. But ultimately, it all even though it looks different, it all feels pretty similar. The story is good. And I have to admit, the developers clearly knew the source material very well. It was one of the better Marvel stories in a video game, to my knowledge. Actually, Marvel usually does pretty well with stories, even in video games. But it was definitely a good one. The voice acting was good enough. And the game itself, while sometimes repetitive, as I mentioned before, is generally quite fun. It is just a nice, if you approach it as a beat-em-up type game, it is a pretty fun game. There's some decent humor in there, as you'd expect out of Marvel. However, a big weak point is still a lot of the games as a service stuff that is still there, even after the service end date. The different stats and menus and gear systems is an interesting idea, and if it was done more like an RPG, I think it could have worked well. But it was poorly implemented and can be very confusing, and it really barely matters anyway. It can be confusing to figure out what you were supposed to do next in the story, and there's certainly a bit of dialogue that needs work. It gets a little bit cringy once in a while. There's a lot of simple fun to be had with Marvel's Avengers. I think Marvel fans who have waited because they heard there were bad reviews and could now at this point pick it up past the service end date, pick it up for a cheap price, $20 or so. I think those particular Marvel fans will enjoy it for what it is, but most people should probably stay away. It's not a horrible game. It's also far from great. Time is limited, and I think unless you're a hardcore Marvel fan, your time is better off with a different game. If you are a hardcore Marvel fan, though, great. I think you would enjoy this game at this point. If you can pick it up for $20 or less, you'd probably be pretty happy with the purchase. So, moving on to the next subject matter. Let's talk about Sony. PlayStation is generally in a good spot right now, but we don't know a whole lot of what's coming. We know Spider-Man 2 is coming this year. We know Death Stranding 2 and Wolverine are coming at some point, probably next year, but we don't know that for a fact. And that's really all we know. So we're really in need of a PlayStation showcase. We don't know if they have anything else releasing this year besides Spider-Man 2. I would assume they probably do. They usually have at least a smaller project in the summer, maybe around the August time period. But we don't know. We know they have some deals with some for exclusives from certain partners. And that's about it. And even those, we don't fully know everything about. So, this week, rumors were flying about Sony. I want to give a special shout out, special thanks to the subreddit Gaming Leaks and Rumors. Go over to Reddit, check out Gaming Leaks and Rumors. They compiled most of this information. And so I do want to thank them for compiling all this information. First, Shinobi602 is a user on Reset Era who's gotten a few things right in the past. He said, to be clear, I don't know what Sony's exact plans are when it comes to a showcase or state of plays and all that, but I know a good amount of teams are at a point when things are certainly ready to be shown. That's exciting. Around the same time, Ches Gordon on Twitter of the Xbox Era podcast heard that he mentioned he's heard that Sony landed a deal with Konami for Metal Gear, Silent Hill, and potentially Castlevania exclusivity, which everyone's been wanting Konami to start making games again. So that would be pretty exciting for a lot of people. The big rumor everyone's been pointing towards is an MGS3 remake that would be PlayStation exclusive, and then re-releases of MGS 1, 2, and 3 on everything, just like the original version straight ports, is the current rumors that are going around. And then lastly, we come to Jeff Grubb, who is generally pretty accurate with this type of information. He the last few years he's leaked most of the schedule for the Summer Game Fest and E3, Nintendo showcases, Sony showcases, Xbox showcases, so on and so on. This is something he's usually pretty good at. And he mentioned that there is most likely a PlayStation showcase the week of May 25th. His specific words were that Jeff Grubb's Summer Game Fest has an update. That timing on PlayStation Showcase is right as of now. So it could possibly get delayed, I think is what he's trying to say. But right now, he's pretty confident that it is going to be the week of May 25th. Now, what can we expect? Obviously, Konami rumors. Obviously, Spider-Man 2, which I am very, very excited about. And maybe we see some Death Stranding 2 and Wolverine. I kind of doubt it with Wolverine. I bet they'll wait to show us anything from Wolverine until after Spider-Man 2 releases. Death Stranding is a little bit difficult to pinpoint what's going on there. Luckily, on the PS5 subreddit, user Celeborn201 compiled a list of everything that is currently rumored that PlayStation is working on. And I wanted to take a look at that list real quick. We do know about several live service games that could be potentially coming this year. So let's take a look at the list. First off is Naughty Dog. They're PlayStation's biggest developer. And right now we know that they are working on a Last of Us multiplayer title. That is confirmed. It was at one point called Factions. We don't know if that is still the name. We do not know when it is coming out. The other titles are rumored that Naughty Dog is working on right now, rumored, are The Last of Us Part 3 and a new IP. And chances are we won't hear about either of those for many, many years. Next, we want to talk about Santa Monica Studio. Just released God of War Ragnarok. I don't think we're going to see anything from Santa Monica. There are rumors about a new AAA game. Some believe the title could be Darkside. I find it hard to believe. They clearly spent a lot of time on God of War Ragnarok. I'm not sure how they would have been developing another game alongside that. There's also rumors about them developing a separate new IP with a sci-fi theme to it, and I'd be pretty hyped for that, but I don't think we're actually going to hear anything from Santa Monica unless it is related to God of War Ragnarok, perhaps a DLC or an upcoming update of some sort, or a PC port or something along those lines. Next is Insomniac Games. And Insomniac Games are a bunch of crazy people. And by that I mean they seem to release banger after banger constantly. Their development time is like almost non-existent. They in just like the last 5 years or so, they released Spider-Man, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet and Clank, and they have Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine in development. And they were the ones who were working on the PC ports of a lot of these games. So clearly, they know what they're doing and could get a lot out there. Sony's purchase of Insomniac Games a few years back is definitely paying off. This time, though, I don't think there's any surprises. Spider-Man 2 is perhaps one of the most anticipated games of the year. At least from PlayStation, it's probably the most anticipated game of the year. Starfield for Xbox and Zelda for Nintendo. So that's coming out this year. We'll probably see that. They also have Wolverine in the pipeline. And there are rumors of a new multiplayer IP, like a new IP that's multiplayer. The post that I'm reading this off of says they wouldn't be surprised if we saw a teaser at this year's showcase. It's not impossible. Even with Insomniac being Insomniac, it just doesn't seem likely. I think they're going to focus on Spider-Man 2, and that makes sense. Next is Guerrilla Games, and they are also just very busy. They just released Horizon Call of the Mountain, the Forbidden West DLC, Forbidden West itself. They've been busy. Recently, they announced their intentions to develop Horizon 3, but that is most likely many years on. And we do know from leaks, and we know this for a fact, that they are developing a Horizon multiplayer title. Most likely a live service-like game. The leaks make it look kind of like a Monster Hunter type game. And I think it could be really fun. Graphically, it kind of looked Fortnite-ish. And then gameplay-wise, it looked kind of like a Monster Hunter. There's also rumors of a Horizon MMO. And possibly a mobile game. And there's also rumors of a Horizon Zero Dawn remaster for the PS5. Which I think is kind of a dumb idea, because you can just play the original and it still looks fine, still plays well. I don't know. I think it's dumb. But that is what the rumors are pointing towards right now. Sucker Punch. Yeah, they just developed Ghost of Tsushima here recently. Rumors are pointing towards Ghost of Tsushima 2. They have a long history of quickly following up new IPs with successful and even better sequels. And so Ghost of Tsushima 2 makes sense. There's also rumors based off of a job posting of a multiplayer project of some sort. As for Polygamy Digital, they're the Gran Turismo developer. They just released a latest installment of Gran Turismo. And they've apparently already started development of the next one. There's also a Gran Turismo movie. And while obviously they would not be making that, the movie studio would be. It would not surprise me if it showed up in a PlayStation showcase in some form, in some way. Media Molecule, most well known for Little Big Planet and recently Dreams, just announced they're stopping support for Dreams. And they did tell fans they're working on their next project. We don't know much about what they're doing next. I would imagine it'd be something creative, kind of like Dreams. They said it's not going to be like Dreams 2 or anything, but I think it could be a spiritual successor of sorts. I think that just makes sense. Bluepoint Games. Most recently, they developed. They work on a lot of the Soulsborne type games for Sony. Right now, rumors are pointing towards a Bloodborne sequel, as well as a remaster of the first game. Since they recently did the Demon's Soul remake. Housemarque, one of Sony's recent acquisitions. Rumors have it that they're working on a new IP. Bin Studio. Rumors also have it with them that they've chosen to work on a new open world IP with multiplayer elements. San Diego Studio. Always working on MLB The Show. London Studio. Rumors have it that they're working on a new fantasy multiplayer IP. Team Asobi is apparently working on a 3D action game. Firesprite is rumored to be working on a Twisted Metal reboot. There's also rumors of a AAA narrative-driven horror adventure title. Really, there's a lot of rumors. There's rumors of a next-generation action shooter and a mobile game as well. Firewalk Studios is currently creating a new AAA multiplayer IP. Haven Studios, a AAA multiplayer IP. Valkyrie Entertainment is rumored to be working on an unannounced strategy game. Savage Game Studios is rumored to be working on a new unannounced AAA mobile live service action game. Nixxes Software is more of a porting studio, so they're most likely working on a PC port of one of Sony's games. Rumors point towards Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, but could really be anything. And there's also XDev, uh, which is a co-development team that helps develop other games. They're more of a support studio, and so they could be helping with just about anything. We also know they have the Visual Arts Studio, which is rumored to be working on something Uncharted related. They also have Bungie, which is is rumored to be working on another multiplayer game. And that's really all we know for Sony Studios, and that doesn't really even count third-party deals, Konami, Final Fantasy stuff. There could be anything going on with PlayStation Studios right now, so I'm pretty excited for this upcoming showcase. But that was a lot of information. Let's take a bit of a break, and then we'll move on to our next topic. So there is apparently a new Superman game in development. Superman does not have the best history with video games. He is the most notoriously well-known Superman game is Superman 64, and it's well known because of how horrible it is. It was mostly flying through rings. For those who don't know, it's just really bad. But according to CEO David Zaslav, could be a new Superman game in development. I'm reading this from GameRant.com. After the merger of Warner Media and Discovery last year, Zaslav have been overhauling a lot of DC-related projects, including his video games and theoretical films. One of the biggest things that fans are looking forward to is the new Superman Legacy film, directed by James Gunn, who is also put at the forefront of the DC film universe. The film was directly commented on in an earnings call with Zaslav regarding the first quarter of 2023. Zaslav discussed the potential of Warner Bros. Discovery's current portfolio of IPs, where they could all be part of various interactive entertainment formats. This includes feature-length films, video games. Brings up Hogwarts Legacy and is how it could work. He specifically states Hogwarts Legacy was such a big success and how it brought players into the game's world, and that could be possible for other IPs the company owns, including Superman. He used Superman as an example several times for what could be going on with their video games. And James Gunn at one point also mentioned DC video games. We know a Wonder Woman game is in development. It was shown off at one point. Well, not really shown off. We were given like a teaser trailer type thing. But we know it's there. And so a Superman game makes sense. I would be curious how they would do it. Superman is a character that can be extremely overpowered, so you have to balance him out for a Superman game. There are several fan games that have managed to do this. The most notably, my personal favorite would be... what was that game called? I can't remember the name of the game. Undefeated. That's right, Undefeated on Steam is Superman-like. And if they just do that, they could be onto something. I think that would work very well. So I am curious what could be on the horizon for the Man of Steel. So next I want to talk about Road 96. Road 96 has recently had a prequel release called Road 96 Mile Zero, and I have not played it yet. It's on my to-play list. I'm going to get around to it eventually. It's coming. I'm going to play it eventually. But I did want to take this opportunity to talk about the first game, Road 96, which is honestly one of my favorite indie games. It's a fantastic game with a fantastic story. If you are a fan of games, like story-driven type games, where you make a lot of choices, like a Life is Strange or a Telltale game, this game may be for you. And if you had a bit of trouble getting into those types of games, this one may still be worth giving a try, as it's much more interactive than those types of games usually are. Each segment has you making a few choices, interacting with a different character, and playing a few quote-unquote mini-games, as you might call them. At one point, this involves playing air hockey against one of the other characters. Another one has you helping a character find the right broadcast signals for their TV by moving the antenna around. These types of interactions really help liven up the game a bit, making it a bit more interactive than your typical interactive movie, quote-unquote, style game. In fact, even though it's a choice-driven game, I'd have trouble referring to it as an interactive movie because there's so much gameplay involved. The characters are easy to connect to with a lot of strange personalities and humor. You take several trips across the country, and the game takes place in the game takes place in, and each trip is completely random. You'll never take the same trip twice. This does sound more impressive than it actually is, however, as it's mostly pulling from the same, probably 80, maybe 90 or so scenes, and putting them in a random order. However, the randomness of that order can affect how the scenes progress, giving more reason to come back and replay the game. There's also several endings, and I have replayed this game many times trying to get every ending. There's a lot of replayability. The story itself is also quite interesting, and I find myself intrigued by the political aspects, which are quite heavy within the story. And it would be wrong of me not to mention the soundtrack. This soundtrack is fantastic. I'm not usually one to notice soundtracks in video games, but this one is just a particular banger. I find myself humming the tunes in everyday life, even when I'm not playing the game. However, when it comes to the graphics, there's not much particularly impressive. Some of the environments pretty nice to look at, but there's a lot of pop-in and textures. While certainly not horrible, aren't particularly impressive either. Graphically, this almost looks like something out of the Wii PS3 360 era. However, I did not notice any issues with frame rate or performance, and it seemed to play quite well on the Switch that I played it on. All in all, I was impressed that such an amazing game could have been made by such a small team. And this game is the perfect example of how good an indie game can be. I've gone back time and time again since I originally played it, because it is just that good. The main story is probably about 10 to 15 hours, but there's so many reasons to go back. At this point, I've probably spent closer to probably 40 or 50 hours on it. I would strongly recommend this game to absolutely anyone. If you are looking for a new game to play, I think you should check out Road 96. So I want to take a moment to talk about Avatar games. No, I am not talking about the Blue People by James Cameron. I don't care about the Blue People. It's not, well, the first movie's not that great. Haven't seen the second. I just don't care. I'm talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think we are due for a good Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. Or not movie, game. Well, but that's what brings us up. There are movies on the way. We know the first one's going to be about Aang and his friends when they're a little bit older. And so I think it makes sense with movies on the way. It's time to get a video game. Unfortunately, Avatar does not have the best history with video games. There was a few. When the show was airing, they all reviewed that's honestly the best way of putting it. There was also one that was released based on the Avatar: Last Airbender movie, and it did about as well as that movie did. Avatar's also shown up in the Nickelodeon Kart Racers. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl has Aang and Korra and Toph. And then there was a Korra game a few years back, released for Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox. It was developed by Platinum Games, I believe, and I enjoyed that one, but it did review pretty average. There was also a 3DS version that was like a tactics game, and I never played it. It didn't sound that interesting. Uh, there is also a mobile game that released here recently, which doesn't look very good. But there are rumors, according to Japanese Amazon, a game called Avatar The Last Airbender Quest for Balance, published by Game Mill, will be released for PS4 and PS5. So one, if if this is real and it's coming out for PS4 as well, which I'm going to assume it would also come out for Xbox. I don't think an Avatar game would be Sony exclusive, but it's possible. But let's say, regardless, it's coming out for PS4. That means it has to be coming out here soon. They're not going to release a game 2 years from now that's also coming out on PS4. It's just not going to happen. So I would hope this is something that we'll see here soon. I hope it's real because we are due for an Avatar game, and I hope we get a good Avatar game. That would be nice. So now we're going to take a quick break. Last one, I promise, at least for this episode. We'll get right back into things. So we are going to talk about Niantic again. A topic that I've talked about before. We're talking about it again. Pokemon Go. New controversy this time. Whether or not its revenue is down. This comes from Kotaku. Using data from market research tool AppMagic, MobileGamer.biz reported that Pokemon Go's revenue for the month of April was down $34.7 million, which would be the game's lowest monthly total since February 2018. However, developer Niantic says that figure is wrong. In fact, it says that the revenue is up. A spokesperson told Eurogamer, "We generally don't comment on third-party estimates of our revenue as they are often incorrect," which is the case here. AppMagic's data did put February revenue at a high of $58 million before dipping to $42.8 million in March. Which I gotta say, if $42.8 million is a low, that's a pretty good low. Or $34.7 million. I would be perfectly happy with $37 million. That'd be great. Or $34.7 million. This comes from controversy that I've discussed before related to their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. They tried to make the game more remote temporarily. People liked it. They tried to make it less remote when the pandemic ended. People didn't like that, so they went back to it being relatively remote, and now they're making a change again. And they upped prices of playing remotely, pretty much. I made my thoughts on this generally pretty well known in a previous episode. Still, I find it interesting that people are tracking this so closely. I also find it interesting that Niantic responded when they don't usually respond. To me, this says that they are probably somewhat concerned, but they don't seem to be changing their mind. I don't think there's much more to say there. They say that this year's changes have already increased in-person rating, and they're excited to introduce new features over the coming months. We'll see what happens. I know there's a Pokemoners Discord server that has found some of those new features. I'm not going to go into detail here, but I am interested to see where things are going with Pokemon Go. So I went to Indiana Comic Con over the weekend. I went Saturday. I cosplayed as a Team Rocket Grunt. I had quite a bit of fun. I wanted to share a few thoughts. Uh, One, the exhibition hall was mostly pretty good. There were a few vendors I didn't think should be there, but it was mostly pretty generally related to Comic Con and nerd and geek culture. Conventions, I ask a simple thing though. Please stop inviting, or please stop having mobile phone providers at your conventions. Nobody goes to a convention looking for a mobile phone provider. Nobody. Guest list was good enough. It didn't have much for me, and the ones I was interested in were generally pretty expensive. Uh, Grant Gustin from The Flash was there, and I should have gone to his panel. It was at a time it wasn't super convenient, so it didn't work out. But it was good enough guest list. I have heard how bad the retro gaming market is right now, but man, did it show at this convention. They had like 3 or 4 exhibitors that had retro games, and they were all asking for way too much money, especially in the GameCube era. And then there was one vendor who was selling like one of those retro machines that has all those emulators and wanted like $500 or $600, and it had everything up to the 64-bit era, but it didn't have GameCube or PS2 or anything. And it just at $500 to $600 for what is essentially just a bunch of emulators. I don't know. The video game marketplace in general for this convention seemed kind of scummy. Although, on a side note, there was plenty of stuff there to play as far as video games go. They had some tournaments and stuff, and that was pretty fun. They also had some open gaming, both video games and board games. That was pretty fun. There were decent enough panels. I went to a panel on weird retro games that was interesting to listen to. I do wish conventions would start using badges instead of wristbands. Gen Con is our only local convention that really does this. It's not something I usually notice, but the wristband they gave out this year was particularly annoying, and I'd hate to imagine having to wear one of those all 3 days for the people going all 3 days. I also wish they had a better spot set aside for pictures of cosplayers. There were quite a few cosplayers there. Not as many as I might have liked, but that's fine, whatever. It's not really my place to judge that sort of thing. But people kept stopping in the walkways to take pictures with the cosplayers, which is reasonable because there wasn't a place set aside to take pictures with the cosplayers. A lot of the conventions, like Gen Con, usually has an area set aside specifically where cosplayers can hang out, and people go there to take pictures of the cosplayers, and that doesn't stop the problem completely, but it does help prevent people from stopping in the walkway and stuff. And I think more conventions should do that. I believe PopCon also does that. Indie PopCon, I think they do that usually. I forget, it's been a few years since I've been to a convention. But I do think it's something more conventions should do. It just would make it easier for people to walk through the different hallways. And I think most people would enjoy being able to see all the cosplay in one spot like that. Or at least most of it. Yeah. There was plenty of stuff to purchase. I bought a shiny Rayquaza plushie. I bought a new board game, which I forget the name of. I need to remember what the name of it was. What was the name of the new board game? Game of Ham. It's like a Cards Against Humanity type game, but it can also be played as a board game instead of just a card game. And it also is supposed to be more grammatically correct, which is something that bothers me in Cards Against Humanity. So I like that. all in all, I'd say this was like a 7 out of 10 convention experience. Not bad from the first one back, but it really only got me excited for Gen Con. So I'm really looking forward to be going to Gen Con all 4 days this year. That is going to be fun. So the last bit of news that I want to talk about that I see going a little bit under the radar is that we are getting an Inspector Gadget game. Now, it is not exactly what I would want, but it looks interesting enough. I did watch a little bit of Inspector Gadget growing up. I wasn't huge into it. I do remember going to the theater for the first movie. And then I didn't see the second one until like years and years later, which is probably for the best. Because the second one's not very good. Even the first one's just okay. But like the cartoon was pretty decent. I wouldn't consider myself a huge Inspector Gadget fan, but it is something I enjoy enough. And so when I heard an Inspector Gadget game, I thought that sounded interesting. I thought this is a character that feels like it was made for a video game. Unfortunately, it is not exactly what I would want. It sounds like it is a party game. It's called Inspector Gadget Mad Time Party. I'm reading this off of Destructoid.com. It's releasing in September of this year. It is a party game, which is not quite what I would want. It's going to have a bunch of mini games like Mario Party, and I think that's a missed opportunity, to be honest. Like, I'm sure it could be fine, but like Inspector Gadget seems like someone who could make for a good like action adventure, maybe even like a platforming type game. Just like a more like standard video game, and a game with just like a bunch of mini games. This does seem like a missed opportunity, to be honest. I'm sure there's a chance it will still be good, but I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's something Inspector Gadget would be good for. If you have the Inspector Gadget IP, it should be more of like an adventure type game. There is a single player mode that allows you to explore Metro City and complete challenges and quests. Hopefully that's decent. The story involves time travel and the Updominus Inspector targeting each of his ancestors for parts of a time machine. They brought in Tan Chaplin, which is the daughter of Inspector Gadget's creator, Gene Chaplin, to do the soundtrack. So they'll at least have some respect for the property. I don't think a party game was the right way to take this. Just a standard action adventure game is the way I would have wanted this. Still, it might be worth checking out on sale. It's going to come out at $40, but that seems like a lot for what it is. I think it's coming out on everything. PC, PS4, PS5, and Switch. So it's not coming out on Xbox, which is kind of weird. But whatever. I don't know. I would have rather like a different type of game. But at least they're acknowledging that this IP exists. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Please, if you're listening on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not listening on YouTube, you can still go over to YouTube and like, comment, and subscribe. And whatever you are listening on, whether it be Amazon's podcasting service, Spotify, whatever, make sure you're following or subscribing or whatever button they use to make sure you see future episodes. My name is Derek Deputy. Thank you for listening. I hope you have an awesome day.